In this tutorial, we're going to look at another foundational concept for culture, that being the concept of time. Imagine that you are wanting to buy a coffee and you're walking toward the counter in a small cafe. But it is busy and there are 4 other people converging on the counter at the same time. What would be the right way to arrange yourselves in order to get served? In my culture, we would all try to think about precisely who was first and in what order the other people came into the shop and approached the counter. Often, without any verbal communication, we would make sure that we were all in the correct chronological order, and then we would line up at the counter to be served in that order. If someone obviously skipped ahead in the line, we would consider that person to be cutting in, and we would feel irritated with the offender. We might even say something about it. Once we were at the counter, we would expect the undivided attention of the server until our order was completed. But on what basis do people in my culture line up for coffee? Lining up or not lining up is a culturally determined behavior based on cultural values. It has quite a bit to do with the value placed on time. Where time is highly valued, a chronological, orderly approach to being served in any setting is the norm. Lining up is an expression of the high value placed on time. Because everyone's time is valuable, whoever arrived first should be served first, and those who arrived later should be served later. In other cultures, the more important factors to consider, other than who arrived first, are things such as who has seniority or who deserves more respect, and maintaining a relationship with all these customers. These cultures place a higher priority on events or people rather than on time. Cultures differ greatly in how people conceive of and handle time, and how their concept of time affects their interactions with each other. We will look at 2 poles on this dimension: time-oriented and event-oriented. Time-oriented. Time is the given, the most important factor, and people are the variable. The needs of people are adjusted to suit the demands of time, schedules and deadlines, etc. Time is quantifiable, and a limited amount of it is available. People do one thing at a time and finish it before starting something else, regardless of the circumstances. Here are some behaviors or characteristics that are more likely to apply to a culture where time is a priority. Time is money. Time is given a high value in a time-focused culture. To be late is rude. Being on time is important and in time-oriented cultures. I'll do that one again. To be late is rude. Being on time is important in time-oriented cultures. Schedules are sacred because time demands on schedules. Schedules are sacred because time depends on schedules. The focus is on the task, getting the job done. A time focus thinks less about people and more about goals. Plans are fixed, once agreed upon. Changes in plans upset time-focused people who live by their plans. Placing a priority on time is consistent with an individualist viewpoint because it takes other people into account less than people-focused cultures. Having to wait is an insult because being late is rude and in a time-focused culture. Having to wait is an insult because being late is rude in a time-focused culture. Interruptions are bad because they upset the schedule. And people stand in line. Being waited on one at a time is time-focused behavior. Now we will look at the other pole of this concept of time. Event or people-oriented. Time is the servant and tool of people. Time is adjusted to suit the needs of people. More time is always available, and you are never too busy. People often have time to do several things simultaneously as required by circumstances. It's not necessary to finish one thing before starting another, nor to finish your business with one person before starting in with another. Here are some behaviors or characteristics that are more likely to apply to a culture where events and people are more important than time. Being made to wait is normal, and waiting isn't bad in cultures where being on time is less important. Interruptions are part of life. Upsetting schedules doesn't matter where schedules aren't that important anyway. The focus is on the person and establishing a relationship because people have more value than time. Placing a priority on the person is consistent with the collectivist viewpoint because collectivists are more attuned to the needs of others. Deadlines are an approximation because being on time or adhering to deadlines is not as crucial in a people-focused world. To be late is to be late. It doesn't have any other meaning. Being late matters less where time matters less. Plans are always changing. When time isn't the priority, plans can change more easily because the schedules are not the determining factor. People are never too busy to spend time with other people. There is always enough time in a people-focused world. Here is a diagram of general tendencies in regard to time for various cultures. Of course, generalizations really can't be made, but these are cultural tendencies. How about you? This exercise can help you to discover whether your own behavior tends to be more time-focused or people-focused. It is important to consider where your cultural tendencies lie in regard to this area, particularly if you are considering working with people of another culture or living in a community that has a different value of time. Being aware that there are widely differing views on the value of time and what your particular view is can help you to avoid misunderstandings and frustration. Knowing your own point of view and seeing it from the other person's point of view is a big step in becoming a part of your new community. As we read the paired statements, the A and B, note the one that best describes the action you would take or the way you feel about a particular topic. 1A. People should stand in line so they can be waited on one at a time. Or B. There is no one to stand in line. People will be waited on when they are ready. Number 2. Interruptions should be avoided whenever possible. Or 2B. Interruptions usually cannot be avoided and are often quite beneficial. 3A. It's more efficient if you do one thing at a time. 3B. I can get as much done if I work on 2 or 3 things at the same time. 4A. It's more important to stick to the schedule. Or 4B. It's more important to complete the task, transaction, or conversation. 5A. Unanticipated events are hard to accommodate and should be avoided where possible. 5B. Unexpected things happen all the time. That's life. 6A. You shouldn't take a telephone call or acknowledge a visitor when you are meeting with another person. 6B. It would be rude not to take a phone call or to ignore a visitor who drops by. 7A. Deadlines are like a promise. Many other things depend on them, so they should not be treated lightly. Or 7B. You shouldn't take deadlines too seriously. Anything can happen. What's a deadline between friends? 8A. It's important in a meeting or a conversation not to become distracted or digress. You should stick to the agenda. Or 8B. Digressions, distractions are inevitable. An agenda is just a piece of paper. 9A. I tend to be task-oriented. Or 9B. I tend to be people-oriented. 10A. Personal talk should be saved for after hours or during lunch. 10B. Personal talk is part of the job. Now that you have made your selections, calculate whether you came out more on the time or event people-oriented side. The behaviors listed under A tend to be more characteristic of time-focused people. The behaviors listed under B tend to be more characteristic of event or people-focused people. Keep in mind that there is nothing scientific about this exercise, that it doesn't prove anything about you, but it might give you some idea of your own tendencies and some food for thought as to how you might relate to another cultural context.